Welcome back to Educator.com's English Grammar course. This lesson is about basic verb forms and basic verbs. Let's get started. All right, to begin with, we're going to ask, what is a verb? We're going to learn what they are, how they work, what they do, how to use them. We're going to look at the 5 major kinds of verbs: action verbs, linking verbs, helping or auxiliary verbs, transitive verbs, and intransitive verbs. Then we're going to look at the 3 base forms of verbs: the base form, the present participle form, and the past participle form. Finally, we're going to learn how to use the basic verb forms. All right, what is a verb? Well, the word verb in English comes from the Latin verbum, which means word. Basically, a verb is the most essential word in English. You can have a one-word long sentence in English, and in order to be grammatical, that word absolutely must be a verb. Verbs express an action or a state of being. There are 5 major kinds. Action verbs describe an activity. Linking verbs connect a subject to its complement. We'll look at that in a moment. Helping verbs help other verbs to construct special tenses. Tenses are something we'll cover in a later lesson. Transitive verbs connect subjects to direct objects and sometimes indirect objects too. And intransitive verbs do not have complements or direct objects. All right, to begin with, action verbs. Action verbs are the most well-known kinds of verbs. They describe action. I ran down the hill. Miners dig tunnels. He's thinking about it. Note that action verbs do not always describe physical action. Thinking is an action too. So, if someone's doing something, whether it's with their body or not, it's probably an action verb. Now we come to linking verbs. Linking verbs connect a subject with its complement, usually an adjective, noun, or pronoun. Now, what is a complement? We'll cover that. Think of linking verbs as any verb you can replace with an equal sign. Let's look at an example. The cookies smell amazing. Smell is our verb here, and it connects cookies with amazing. Cookies equals amazing. David is a police officer. David equals officer. It seems quiet outside. It equals quiet. A complement is a noun, a pronoun, or an adjective that is described in a sentence as being equivalent to the subject. It's the thing on the other side of the equal sign. All right, helping verbs. Helping verbs are usually forms of the verbs to be or to have. They are used alongside other verbs to form special tenses. We're going to cover tenses in detail in a later lesson, but for now, let's look at a couple of examples of helping verbs so you'll recognize them when you see them. She has traveled the world. Traveled is the helping verb helping the main verb. Has is the helping verb helping the main verb, traveled. They are coming to visit. Are is the helping verb helping the main verb, coming. And Sarah has taken the bus before. Has is the helping verb helping the main verb, taken. Okay, transitive verbs. Now here we get into something just a little bit complicated because the same verb can be several kinds of verb at once. Action verbs, for example, can be either transitive or intransitive verbs. So, what's a transitive verb? Transitive verbs take a direct object and sometimes an indirect object too. The way I remember this is transit usually refers to transportation or to travel. Transitive verbs take you to that object. The forward kicked the ball. The direct object is ball. Ball is what is receiving the action. The transitive verb kicked takes you to the direct object, ball. Pass me that book, would you? Book is the direct object. It's receiving the passing. It's being physically handed over. And me is the indirect object. I'm receiving the book, although not the pass. I enjoy riding horses. The horses are receiving the riding, so they're the direct object, so riding is a transitive verb. Intransitive verbs, as the name might suggest, an intransitive verb is any verb that doesn't take a direct object. So the dog howled. It didn't howl anything in particular, it just howled. The firefly glowed. Nothing received the glow, the firefly just did it. And I want to run. I don't want to run any particular thing, I just want to run. Intransitive verbs. Okay, basic verb forms. Verbs change their shape according to the time in which they take place. There are 3 basic forms used to create all these different tenses. Now we're going to go into tenses in detail in the next lesson. For right now, we need the forms that are the building blocks of those tenses. The base form of a verb is the first person singular present tense, the form you'd use in the sentence I blank, or after to. All right, so there's the base form. The present participle form is usually created by adding ing to the base form. And the past participle form is created by adding the suffix d or ed to the base form. The base form of a verb. Base form of a regular verb, and we'll cover irregular verbs later, is the first person singular present tense. It's also used to form the infinitive, which we use to describe verbs as abstract concepts. Pretty much any time you hear an English teacher talk about a verb in the abstract, use the verb blah blah, they will say to blah blah. Let's look at some examples. I walk. The verb here is to walk, and the base form is walk. I speak. The infinitive is to speak, and the base form is speak. I think. The infinitive is to think, and the base form is think. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, we're going to build on it. Let's look at the present participle form, which is a very long name for a pretty short suffix. The present participle form is created by adding the suffix ing to the base form. It's used to form specific tenses. So, I am walking. We've added the ing to the base form walk. The infinitive is to walk, and we get walking, the present participle form. If the base form ends in e, this is important, you take the e off first and then you add the ing. So the base verb to stare, the verb to stare and the base form stare becomes staring. Notice that that e is gone. And finally, if the last syllable of the base form has a short vowel sound followed by a consonant, you double the consonant. This is all about sound. So in this case, we have the infinitive to rap, the base form is rap, and the present participle is rapping. We doubled that P to get rapping. Otherwise, if you left the P off, then it would look like raping, and you would have an entirely different sentence. Okay, the past participle form. The past participle form is usually created by adding the suffix ed to the base form of a verb. I walked to school. There's our friend walk again. Base form walk. We add the ed, and we get walked. Now, there are some complications. If the base form ends in e, just add d. So there's our old friend stare, and it becomes stared. We've just added the d. And if the base form ends in y, change the y to an I and add ed. The baby cried. The infinitive is to cry. The base form is cry. We get rid of that y, we turn it into an I, and we get, with ed, cried. All right. You've learned the rules for forming the basic verb forms. See if you can fill in the missing forms on this chart. Take a good look. We've got the base forms fade, snore, and dry. The present participles sighing and dancing, and the past participle sewed. See if you can figure out what goes in the blanks. And there we have it. Fade with the present participle becomes fading. We took that e off to add the ing, but to turn it into faded, we just added a d. Sighing, you knew the base form would have to be sigh, which means the past participle is sighed. Snore, we took the e off to make snoring, and we just added a d to it to make snored. Dance, if you know your English spelling, you knew it ended with an e, so that gives you your base form and your past participle form. Dry, of course, becomes drying, but because dry ends in that y, we have to turn it into an I and add the ed to get dried. And sewed becomes, the base form sew, and the present participle sewing. All right, how do you use basic verb forms? Simple review, use the base form as the foundation of other forms. Use the present participle form to create the present progressive tense and gerunds. We'll go over both of those in a later lesson. And finally, use the past participle form to create past tense forms. Again, tenses in the next lesson in the series. See if you can find the verbs in these sentences. I'm going to bake a cake. The trees rustled in the wind. Please put the plates on the table. I love that movie. There's a baby crying in the next room. And he walked his dog every day. Take a good look, pause the video if you need to, see if you can find the verbs. And there they are. I'm going. There's our present participle, it ends in ing. To bake, there's our base form, a cake. The trees rustled, past participle, ed, in the wind. Please put, base form, the plates on the table. I love that movie, base form. There is, to be is an irregular verb, but we'll say base form for this purpose. A baby crying, present participle, in the next room. And he walked his dog, past participle, every day. That's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching. Educator.com.